everybody, and you're very welcome to the latest episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. Some Signs Are Secret, Some Manifest by Austin McQuinn is an exhibition of new work created specifically for the double-height atrium and galleries of South Tipperary Art Centre. Austin's new paintings on ash wood panels and found antique prints are intensely gesso-ed, collaged and inked to psychedelic effect. The 17-foot tower of discarded Aran jumpers in the atrium signals the unique Norman architecture of the tower houses in South Tipperary and echoes an earlier installation that Austin created at Kilmainham Gaol, presenting the sweaters as totems to make a new tribal or fetish power object for the gallery. In a challenging exploration of the traditional and the discarded, of biopower and queer energy, McQuinn will be artist in residence at the STAC Chapel in the former Kickham Army Barracks. He'll create a 24-hour live-streamed live art performance event entitled Imperial Lunatic. Following the cycle of the new moon rising, Imperial Lunatic will incorporate the artist's body in a series of repeating actions, video clips of volcanoes and processions, percussion, medals, zigzags, tongues and talc. Austin is an award-winning visual artist and performance expert living and working in South Tipperary. He has had several solo exhibitions at the Project Art Centre in Dublin, Butler Gallery Kilkenny and David Cunningham Projects San Francisco, and most recently at the Source Thurlist, where he first exhibited this new body of inked paintings and sculpture. This is Austin's second time as my guest here on the South Tip Arts Podcast, and I was delighted to catch up with him to hear all about this new exciting work. Austin McQuinn, you're very, very welcome to South Tipperary Art Centre. Your exhibition, Some Signs Are Secret, Some Manifest, opened here last Friday evening, and a lovely crowd we had, and it was a really nice evening. The title, enigmatic, as is a lot of your work actually. Okay. So tell me about the title.
Thanks, Emer, for inviting me, and it's great to be here, and a wonderful experience on Friday at the opening for me. I really enjoyed it, and because it's so exciting to see other people looking at the work for the first time. You know, you only get that chance once in an exhibition, and then it's kind of, the ideas are released into the world, and so it's very exciting. Yeah. But your question is about the title. So the title comes from Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, which was written in 1628, and it's a book that I've kind of have around a lot for many years. And
was he a philosopher?
Those? Yeah, he was a philosopher, writer, and this is an epic tome, rambling meditation on the humours of the body. So melancholia was the term at the time for really all emotions in the body and how we read them.
The humours,
The humours, and so his is an extensive sort of survey with all kinds of meditations, and it was an immediate hit in 1628, and has been a kind of a touchstone for anybody interested in that kind of study. The full phrase is, I have it here, is it's from chapter 3, and he says, "Some signs are secret, some manifest, some in the body, some in the mind, and diversely vary according to inward and outward causes, or from the stars, or celestial influences, or from the humours diversely." And then he says, "So must the signs be almost infinite." Okay. So this interests me because it begins in the body, but it's talking about other bodies, like celestial bodies, and other influences on how we feel and how we move around in the world as bodies.
Which makes a whole ton of sense when you think about the fact that we're 90% water or whatever it is. So it would be impossible for us not to be affected by things like tides and moon cycles and all that, I think. Anyway.
Yes. Well, this was very much the thinking then. It was totally accepted that when there's a full moon or when the wind, the heat, everything affects you, and that affects how you think. That's the difference that has been kind of tidied up in modernity for a while, and I think it's very much present again, mind, body, spirit and mindfulness. And it's, that I suppose thinking was removed from the body in a way. It was like the body was this sort of messy, fleshy thing that we had to deal with, and the Enlightenment it's a very general statement. It was about the emphasis was on thinking and the mind, and this was superior, and the body was just a kind of an inconvenience.
Yeah.
But for the medieval or late medieval, early modern mind, thinking and scholarship and art, indeed, everything is located in the body because that's all you've got. That's how you experience the world.
Exactly, yeah.
And I agree with you that it's very much for me, it's related to maybe it's my maturity, but I'm more aware of how connected I am to certainly lunar cycles. I just kind of accept it now.
Yeah.
And it's a full moon, feeling differently.
I find myself, if I have a day where I'm particularly fractious or something, going and look and think, hey, what is happening up there, because it must be that, because what else could it be? When there's no logical explanation sometimes for
I think when you're open to it, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe I suppose if you're not, it has no.
It definitely has happened to me.
it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it's not something everybody would be open to, but I've had that experience a lot where I'm thinking, what is wrong? And I go out, because I do work at night quite a lot, and I go out and I look up and I thought, oh, that's the reason. It's a full
And
moon.
you know what, that knowledge I suppose is coming back in a way, and that's probably why I'm being influenced with, because I'm listening to people talking about stuff like this, but they're pulling the influence from the 1500s and the 1600s and all those astronomers and alchemists and all this kind of lovely mad stuff that went on then that I suppose doesn't really anymore. But
or it goes quiet for a while, and then it surges back up because we need it, because it's not enough to think that you can think your way out of a problem when your body is telling you something else. And it's just we are housed in this living thing, and I suppose it's trying to marry, also for me it's marrying the imagination and what the body is capable of, and that's where an artist is caught and excels.
Watching you work over the last number of weeks, because it took a few weeks for the installation to come together, the prime thing that I've noticed is, which I would have said about your work anyway, meticulousness in the work, but there's a meticulousness in the way you think as well. Does that make sense?
It's a great compliment.
there's so much thought in the work downstairs. Like, there's so much cerebral thought in it, but also the craft in it. That's maybe the wrong word, but the sort of skill in the materials and the working of the materials, and it's really meticulous, and it almost reminds me of, and I know you're preparing for, and we'll talk about in a little while, the performance. You're like a method actor is what's come to mind, because you've almost, you've transformed yourself physically completely, and you've been on a regime. You're so absorbed into the whole process of it that, obviously the physicality of it and the being in the moment and in the now. That's the way I'm looking at you, as even your personality's even been different. Does that make sense? Like, you've been more intense.
Okay.
People who are close to you might see that a lot, but just me as an observer, kind of being on the periphery of it, this is what I've noticed, is just the absolute sort of, I know we talked before when your last show Hypercarbon was on, and the word devotion came up a lot in that, and this has the same sense of devotion in it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love your interpretation. And I'm thinking about that conversation we had 2 or 3 years ago, and talking about that work, which was the origin of the work I'm doing now, which is more complex, let's say.
And you know what? Having listened back to that conversation, I was blown away by, actually, I can see the complete evolution in the way you're thinking and the work. From that show to this show, it's so evident when I listen back. It's so evident that these little things were almost seeds that were beginning to form in your head then, and now we come to the fruition of those thoughts. So interesting. Yeah,
so thinking back to, say, the paintings I was doing 2 years ago for the Source in Thurles for that exhibition, and we can refer to those, I suppose, because to me that's the beginning of this new body of work. That's now going on over 3, 4, 5 years. I hope. It feels like I feel like I have, like when the miners reach a vein, and you have to follow that vein. But to answer your question about the intensity of practice, it comes really from the work itself. So when you were looking at those paintings, we talked about that in my studio at that time, and I remember talking to you about the process. It interests me really the most.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm talking to other artists, like that's what we talk about. How did you do it?
Yeah.
So what these new paintings require, they're ink on canvas, and so I really only get one go at them. You know? So there's a lot of thought, preparation. Not really too much preparatory drawing or anything, but a lot of kind of like approaching it, and then you really just get one. Now that one go might take 8 hours, you know, all in one go. But I think that's where it comes from. It's like, right. So if I'm going to do this, you know, and these new paintings were very much about that. Like there was an awful lot of percolation going on in me, and preparing to make a decision and say, okay, I've made my decision. Yeah. I'm going to go with this pink ink, let's say. Yeah. That took a long time to think about. And really, once I've made a decision, then it's go. Because there's really no going back, you know. Now, there's a little more play with these paintings because there's, but not too much. So I think that this approach that you're identifying, that comes out of, I suppose it also comes out of the reward that I get, you know, from that intensity, and the work really demands it. Like if I want to make this image, we'll say in the chapel in the performance, which we're going to talk about, that just demands a certain discipline, you know, and even though I'm making a very undisciplined kind of statement, maybe about liberation from discipline, and the image itself. And any of the paintings, they all require, I don't know if it's any more than any other artist, to be honest. But for me, it's very, it's about the energy as well. You know, the energy is really important. Like it's the energy that I see in the prints that I'm working on top of, or the collage, or the bookbinding paper that I'm working on. I think that's what I'm responding to, Emer. Like
Can you explain to me a little bit about how you came upon the idea of working over these existing old images?
Yes. Okay. So I have used collage before. In fact, I'd say my very first show, I was tearing things out of magazines and working on top of them, and it was a method that I learned probably in college, a way of getting to the image that you want to make. So it can be anything, just a scrap of anything to put down on the blank sheet and then work on top of that and allow the image to come through my own body and hand. So the image is in there waiting to come out. I do believe that. You know, it's romantic maybe, but it's actually true. And if I'm open to it, I mean, that's certainly the case with these. So I see the first one I came across was a painting not by Elizabeth Butler, who I'm more focused on now.
Who we are all loving Elizabeth Butler in here now.
Yes, we're all discovering her. Yeah. It was another painting of a battle. The artist, the name escapes me just at this moment. But I saw it in a local auction here in Clonmel. A pretty wrecked, large print, you know, in terrible condition. But I was totally mesmerised by this painting, which is about a battle between the French and the English in France in 1824 or something. And, you know, that's the subject. But what I saw was this kind of ferocious energy on this piece of paper. So I said, I'm just responding to this. I don't know what I want to do with it, but I want to do something with it. Because, and then it's like I'm seeing through the image, like an X-ray almost, and seeing the dynamics in that painting. And that's what I'm kind of drawn to because of the previous work I'm doing, which is this very dynamic line. Even though it looks dynamic, of course it's very careful, and all I'm moving is my thumb and my finger. The rest of my body is fixed totally. So this painting was very exciting, and then it took a long time for me to make the decision to work on top of someone else's work. Like great conflict about this. Because I felt I don't know, maybe finding things to feel guilty about. You know? But I was looking at this painting. I said, this artist put so much time and effort and thinking into the placement of the thing, and now I'm just going to paint all over it. But I got over that, and because I thought, it's still in tribute, it's still responding to his painting in some way.
Absolutely.
And also, I was reminded, I have used collage before, and a friend of mine, Eva Bovenzi, we were on residency together in Italy last year, and she uses collage. And she said, I was looking at what I was doing, and I had all these conflicts, and she said, well, remember, it's just a piece of paper. And that was the most helpful thing, to me. So when I look at the paintings, that's the way I approach these things in one way, is that they're just images, marks on a paper that I can use work on top of, and it's a way of me getting to my image. It's like anybody. It's like the traditional ragging the paper with ochre, just to take the whiteness off it, and then finding the image come through better, like working on a block of marble or something. Where you're hacking into it and the image will come out. Right? It's that kind of a process. But there is also an acknowledgement, of course, of the subject, which interests me. These paintings celebrating the triumphs of war. And I'm interested in that because of when I'm looking at it, and the other painting, significant painting I suppose here, is the painting of Calvary, figure of Christ on Calvary. And what I'm seeing is, coming back to what we were talking about originally, is the body and its energies and its traumas and its history. The history of the body as a tool, as a weapon, and as a site of horror and imagination in the same moment, So for me, these war paintings made by Elizabeth Butler, late of Bansha Castle, so of course I'm acknowledging though and the subject, but then I'm subverting them, I suppose. I am turning them upside down and I'm painting all over them. It's not an act of iconoclastic.
Did you seek out Elizabeth Butler's paintings?
No, I didn't. They came to you.
Yeah.
Well, I started with the image of closing the gate at Rougemont. So I said, I'm interested in battle now. I'm interested in kind of battle scenes because of this kind of dynamic. And also, I suppose we're in a great time of battle. And it's very heightened at the moment. For so long, we've been culturally being reminded of the war, right? By as if there was only one war ever. When in fact there's a war going on constantly
anywhere, somewhere in the world.
In the Middle East, somewhere. And right now it's in the Crimea, where these paintings were originally made. So I honestly didn't question it too much. I said, this is the zeitgeist coming at me, and I'm going to go with it. I'm not anti-intellectual about it. I'm not making a big statement about war paintings or about imperial power, but I am in it and I'm part of it, and I'm a subject of it historically. So I suppose going back to what you said, yes, there's a lot of thinking going on, but it's like a big funnel, and then it just all filters down into this one image.
It gets distilled.
And my hope is that it leaves all that behind it and becomes a painting that has its own new life, and that transcends all of that. It's got nothing to do with war, actually. It's all about something else. And that's the joy of it, for me, is that it reveals itself as something new.
The other thing that struck me about this whole body is the timing of it, because this time of the year is very significant. Like Christian, it's a very significant time of the year. And
do you mean Easter?
Yes, and the equinox and all that, and the kind of that change in the year, and that sort of, it's almost like that resurrection. There's a rebirth thing. Is it like the rebirth of Austin? The performance, and it's such a mammoth task and an endurance test that I'm trying to imagine how you'll feel after those 24 hours, and whether, there'll be some mad kind of catharsis in it. How do you feel about that?
That's a great question. I guess sometimes I feel it's like the idea has already happened, and it has decided that it wants to be made. So I'm kind of it's up to me now to come along and meet that image. Like, to me, performance, live art, is about image making more than anything else. It's a living image. It's how I use my body to make paintings, and I'm also using it in this way as an art. It's an extension of using my physical capabilities to either draw or perform. But when you're talking about Easter, so
That sort of
And do you mean the Calvary painting?
That's part of it, but not all of it. It's just when I'm thinking about the whole thing in the round, it just sprang to my mind as, oh wow, like this is like. And then at the beginning of when we started to talk here, you talked about this new body of work that started with. It's almost like Hypercarbon was, and now Some Signs Are Secret is like doing this blossoming.
Well, Hypercarbon. I can talk about sight actually with you. I think maybe that might be a key thing or helpful. Say with Hypercarbon in Thurles, I was very aware of where the gallery is in the middle of a bog, and I think that work comes out of the bog, and I was using bog oak, which is, so many hundreds of thousands of years old, and so it's like, it is something, this new work is emerging from somewhere very deep, let's say. And so a lot of the foundation, in fact, there was one painting in that show, which was a large painting, and the title was Dharma Rising. And that's the painting that I think it was the step to this new work, which is definitely more elaborate. It's very Baroque. It's more confident, maybe. It's more confident about itself, and it's trying to locate the image or that kind of energy somewhere. And I think that draws me to these prints by Elizabeth Butler and the Calvary. That in each painting, it's a place. It's Balaclava, it's Inkerman, Waterloo, Calvary. These sites are places where people, humans, men, and mostly, I guess, and horses, were challenged massively. And so these are intense sites. So the Calvary, let's say, in the context of Easter, but in a broader religious iconography context, it's the place and it's the moment before Christ was crucified. So it has that intensity for me. Also, I guess, where does that come from? I was raised Irish Roman Catholic and from a very strongly religious family. And so I have, I would say, a religious education, religious upbringing, but also it gave me access to art. The first images I would have seen was the Angelus. The very first art image. At that time, it was an icon for 1 full minute. Everybody sat and looked at art.
And looked at it.
And then it was over. And it was associated with spirituality, and the spiritual world and dimensions outside of this mortal body. So it's not any commentary on religion.
I know.
It comes from my own experience. I'm not interested in art really that comments on things. I'm not interested really in even artists' opinions about things. I'm even less interested in my own opinions about anything. But I'm very interested in art and art history and its potential. And we don't know its potential as it's happening. So something could be made 50 years ago that's relevant now. And equally now, the work that's very hard to make art in this time, post-pandemic, inside the middle of a war, how do you respond? Some artists love to respond, and sometimes it takes a much longer time to respond. So, if you think of the 1920s, it was the work of maybe of the 50s that responded to that. Who knows? My point is, yes, I'm always perhaps looking for an extraterrestrial dimension in everything. And
I like that. I do like that a lot.
So we didn't talk about the jumpers at all.
No, but I want to know a little bit more about the performance, just in terms of what we can, while we're on, and we'll move on to the towers, because I don't want to ignore the jumpers at all.
So we'll stay with the body.
So the performance is going to happen on April the 22nd.
Yes.
Which begins at midnight on Saturday, and then will continue all the way to midnight on Saturday, Sunday.
Yes, so it starts at midnight, the rise of the new moon.
And its title is Imperial Lunatic.
Yes, the Imperial Lunatic.
Which is
just Imperial Lunatic.
Imperial Lunatic. So
the title is Imperial Lunatic. It's a live art performance of 24 hours duration. It's, I would say, a performance installation. So all the other elements are just as important. There's a video of a volcano. There is talc.
Right.
A vat of talc.
Okay.
There's a mask, which I'm still working on.
Mm-hmm.
It's tongue sticking out.
Okay.
And my own body.
Yeah.
And a man's suit, which I've covered the jacket in medals of all kinds. So these are some of these materials, like the Aran jumpers. I am visiting some materials I've used before, very much in conversation with Helena Tobin, who's curated both the exhibition and the performance, the live art. I say live art performance because in America they say performance, in England they say live art. So in Ireland I think we say live art performance. Because it's important to use the word art there, because it's not a show. It's not rehearsed. For me, it's not something that can be rehearsed. It's very risky.
Yeah.
And so just
brave.
Relating to what we've been talking about, say, in the gallery, these military paintings. So for me, I wanted the exhibition in the gallery to be quite formal, and where the paintings can be themselves, and no video, no technology, and the sculpture of the Aran sweaters is itself. And just have lights, a natural light, which I've kind of called in from outside with the window treatment. So all of this is just extending into the chapel now. All those elements to me are I'm just bringing them in and animating them and making them dynamic in a different way. Also, the chapel is loaded with its own histories. As a chapel, as a place of worship, Christian chapel.
Yeah, and then a whole military connection on top of that.
Military chapel, and a lot of military got married there.
They did. A lot of people who would have, and it's been said to me a few times, lots of babies baptised in their families, army families, which there would be a lot of around here from when the barracks was active. And there's a lot of memories,
They're all really important. They are
baptisms.
major events to get married and to baptise a baby in that place. Also at the opening, do you remember we met someone whose grandfather worked there when it was a printers workshop.
I know,
Before it was ever a chapel. So that was interesting to me, that things are not as fixed as we think. And that this actually was originally a place of creative action by printers and artists.
And now look, there we're going back to it again. It's great.
Now it's that's good energy for me to think about when I'm there. That this is not just me kind of usurping this building. The intention it was built. It's got multiple histories, and it's going to have more. And this is the beginning of making new histories in this place. And in fact, I'd say 2 years ago, I saw a dance performance there.
Yes,
and
by the dance platform.
It was Tipperary dance.
Yeah.
Sunday morning, instead of mass, I went to see. I'm not a mass goer, but I was Sunday morning, and we were in a chapel. Yeah. And Fergus O'Cahur was dancing. He did this piece. Maybe it was 20 minutes long, and it was magic. Pure art magic. Yeah. And that was very inspiring to me, and I'm very lucky that Fergus is going to come and talk, have a conversation with me as part of this project. We're going to do that after my performance, and we're going to talk about what it means to perform in places like this. He's done several dances in several chapels. Yeah. And also, in fact, the last time I saw him was in a chapel in Limerick, in St. John's, where Limerick Dance is located. So, artists, art centres have moved into chapels and churches and sacred spaces. And what I'm saying is, I suppose, I acknowledge that. And I kind of, it enters into my thinking and my making.
Yes, absolutely.
So the title, Imperial Lunatic, I first heard that term in Tasmania, actually. And it's a term that was used to describe, this is my interpretation, describe people who are not able to fully contribute to the imperial drive.
Right.
Okay. We're
all imperial lunatics.
Yes. Well,
here we are.
Here we are, because we're not quite capable of functioning with only that goal in mind of the creation of an empire, of a colonial, mindset, which is a certain kind of social order, let's say.
It really is. It's a very foreign concept, like to us. I think.
We have our own colonial history, and we've resisted it and went with it and loved it and hated it and all kinds of relationships with it. But in Tasmania, this was the term, and it was really a term for housing people and looking after them, people whose emotion had got the better of them, or who were overwhelmed in one way or another. And it was the term of the time. You know, a lunatic was the term of the time. We would not use that term now for someone with, say, you know, mental challenges.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a very archaic word, and it's a word I identify with, like, because it's giving space and time to the effects, let's say, of...
Well, I suppose if you even think about the word lunatic and where it comes from, it kind of harks back to what we were talking about before, about being affected by moon cycles. So.
Yes, it's definitely related to what we were talking about earlier. Celestial bodies influencing our bodies. And that is not going to go in a straight line, necessarily.
No.
Okay. And this is where the lunatic enters the frame for me. And I identify, and I don't mean that casually or, you know, in a silly way, you know, but I'm using it in I suppose the term lunatic came out of a time and a period more closer to our friend Robert Burton, where it was more acknowledged that your moods changed and that you weren't always going to be able to get up and work 9 to 5 and be in service to the crown. Okay, so to me, putting the word imperial in front of lunatic gave the lunatic a lot of respect, and it kind of elevates the term.
It does,
and and it acknowledges it in a kind of kind and caring way. This is my interpretation. You know, you're still lunatic, but you're acknowledged and you're sort of looked after. And indeed, you know, in Tasmania, there's many problems because it was a country colonised by convicts. And
yes, of course.
Mostly, as it turns out, and people with a lot of challenges and people with nothing, really nothing. You know, they had nothing left and nothing much to, you know, strive for except maybe the new life. Not an easy life. So it's, I suppose, it's a sort of a mad extension of a baroque extension of maybe just how I feel as an artist. You know, sometimes I feel like an outsider. I feel like I need the state to look after me a little bit, to give me an old grant and you know, get me continue to just be or else. Because I'm not really able to do the other thing. I find it really hard to conform, and it's not headstrong. It's just the way I'm built. You know, and I think. What's marvellous is that there's a great awareness now that, you know...
That there's many ways of living and, you know, and existing and they're all okay.
And they're all they're better. But you're not just automatically called a lunatic if you want to dress a certain way. Or if you don't want to do certain things. If you just physically can't do them. Or if you decide to go walking at night. Or start making something in a corner that nobody needs. You know, I'm very interested in outsider art. I'm very interested, very inspired, and not again in a kind of a casual way, but deeply interested in art that's made in psychiatric institutions. There's a great history of that in European art. Art and psychosis really interests me, and where art has become the saviour of someone. In or just entertainment, you know. Sometimes it's elevated to some other kind of hallowed role, but really it's just a way of surviving for a lot of people.
That outsider art thing is very interesting because is it the unself-consciousness of it that I think it's that for me that always kind of catches me with stuff like that, because it's, you know, it's not supposed to be anything in particular. It's just like, it's so open and unpretentious, and it is what it is, and it's not pretending to be anything. It's not even pretending to be art sometimes. So that's what's lovely.
And it's certainly not trying to be outsider.
It's just somebody's
it's actually,
eccentric vision maybe sometimes. That's
it's also, it's not coming through art learning channels, let's say, a lot of the time. And so it can be free in that way. It's more Picasso would like talk about,
and it's kind of non-conformist as well in that
it's not conforming because it won't behave, because an outsider artist, let's say, or someone in an institution who's making art, say, this drawing is really good, can you make 10 more of those? Because then you will enter the market and you will become less lunatic and more commercially viable, socially organised person. And of course that doesn't work at all. That's not the point at all. So these are just, not trying to be an outsider. It's just authentically where I am. I am a person. I suppose also my outsiderness as a person, maybe where I live, where I've chosen to live, fairly isolated. That was largely economic, I would say, to begin with. You were out in the studio, it's very remote.
It's lovely.
But, it was an economic choice, but also I did choose to stay. It was not just economics, I think. As it turned out, I said, well, I actually can live and work here. I suppose I'm also thinking about other outsiders that inform a kind of an authenticity of living. Certainly entering the chapel.
Yeah.
Let's say, going back to the Lunatic performance, the Imperial Lunatic. If we think of the chapel as a place of, like we were saying about the intensity of its military history and its religious history, these are both institutions that would have, let's say, isolated or been less than welcoming to me as a queer person.
Yeah.
And so it's very challenging for me, like I kind of skirt around these institutions that are just not for me. They are not there to protect me. They are saying you can exist, but we don't really recognize you at all. We recognize you. You can exist and be useful to our institutions, but just don't be yourself. So I think if performance is anything, if live art is anything, it's an opportunity to be completely and authentically yourself. So the challenge for me is to do that in this place. And the elements that I'm using are, it's kind of playful, and it is a kind of a queering of the space. So for me, I'm not a queer theorist by any means, but my understanding of, say, queering processes would be where some things are highly visible and some things are completely invisible in the same moment.
Right.
So if you think of someone like, the highest element of something is like a drag artist or something, where it's hyper visual, almost like a cartoon person, but the real person is completely hidden. And but the two of them are informing the image. It's the hidden, oppressed person who becomes the drag extravaganza. That's queer theory to me. That's where it's at. It's like the two things in the same moment, right there in front of you. And yet you can't tell one from the other. And this is where the confusion is, and this is where all the playfulness is. This is where all the resistance is at the moment in Texas, where we don't know what to do with this. We can totally accept, a pageant child, dressing as a woman, but we can't accept this black outsider, strange queer person dressing as a white woman, and making a living from it. So it's very subversive. And it's also some activities that take place at night. So I'm interested in all kinds of activities, especially all creatural activities that take place at night, like the lives of owls, for example. And nocturnal activity that's just not really able to function in the broad daylight. I'm talking about a dream world, really. Dreaming and the imagination. And that's the place where art is born. It's not the ego. It's nothing to do with artists' egos. It's the id. It's the place of ideas, the primal place. That's what it's about. So performance has nothing to do with my ego or me looking for attention. There's a misconception maybe, and it's an easy one because look, why does this guy need to do this for so long in front of us all?
What was your last performance?
I did a piece in the Triskel Art Centre in Cork as part of a show in 2019.
Okay, so it's not that long ago since you've...
Yeah, it was an exhibition of paintings.
Do you feel that calling come to you every now and again, like when you're away from it, that you're like, oh, I have to do something? Well,
it's a very powerful experience, because you're actually inside in the work. You can't get in any deeper. And you're becoming an image.
It fascinates me, and it's a long time since I've seen a piece of performance art, so I'm really looking forward to this. But it fascinates me in that, it's a very raw, you're so exposed. And I'd probably crawl under the ground before I'd do it myself. And I'm in awe of the fact.
Did you do performance in Waterford?
We did a group performance, but it wasn't, you weren't individually exposed.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
So we all had our own sort of section in it.
Okay.
We were all doing it, so it didn't have that sort of, I'm totally alone and exposed,
I suppose there's a short and a long history of performance art.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very drawn to work of Japanese artists from the 1950s, where performance really took hold, and coming out of Buto dance, and when the beginning of Buto dancing, and also in America. There would be an artist like Joan Jonas. She had a big show in IMA, when IMA opened in Dublin. That was very influential on me. So it's a very small practice in a way, but it's always personal. Like my great friend and mentor, I would call, Bernadette Cotter in Cork. Her performance work, she really integrates her live work into her exhibition. So she literally becomes sculptural, you know, inside the space, say for the duration of the opening very often. And I have made pieces like that, you know. This piece in the chapel is probably the most theatrical.
And the longest, surely.
It's definitely the longest. But the very first piece I did probably was in Project in Dublin, and that was 5 hours. Okay. You know, straight off. Yeah. Because I knew that's how long it was going to take to make the images I wanted to make. And this is the same. It's like, well, there's also an endurance aspect to it, because I do take on and put off this jacket that's very heavy. I'm covered in medals, military medals, dog tags, holy medals of St. Michael.
Oh, the weight.
And Irish dancing medals from a previous incarnation of a medal jacket.
Your own Irish dancing? No.
Some of my own, but mostly from a champion Irish dancer that I worked with to make a piece. We used her All Ireland medals. So it has a lot of those cultural kind of relevances. It is, you know, the military, how the medals are always worn on the front, on the chest, on the front, not on the back. You know, always on the front, on the chest. And my earliest memory of medal wearing in performance was my sister, actually. When we were learning Irish dancing, the convention at the time was that the girls wore their medals on their costume.
Okay, you know, while they danced.
When they were in competition, they wore them on their chest.
It's almost like generals in the army to show their status.
Or there was a little Bonine apron you could put them on and tie that around you. But that's a very early memory I have of seeing my sister Anna dancing and putting medals on, bouncing on her body, and thinking it was an amazing image. So I've just totally extended and blown that image up into this.
And I imagine the sounds those make as you move as well be very interesting sounds.
Yeah. So the performance is a cycle, like lunar cycle. So it's 24 hours. I suppose the 24 hours comes from one day. What am I going to do with one day? And so when I bring it down to the hours, I'm going to do one thing, and I'm doing it 24 times. That's not a lot.
Right, okay. So there's an element of repetition.
There is an element of repetition. It doesn't all build to a big thing. The building will be my fatigue and how I can
You're physically, how you appear from
but that's
the start to the end.
It's about the cycle, you know, just once around the moon, going around the earth one time, and then us in circulation around the sun, and the whole extension out of that. So it's kind of connecting to that celestial element. Yeah, it is really focusing on one day, hour by hour, minute by minute. What am I going to do with this one day? Because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I actually don't know. Yeah. Like none of us know right now.
None of us know, sure.
We actually don't know. So all I have is the power that I can plan ahead for 24 hours. So that's part of it, you know. It's also, it's very challenging, and there's other elements, like I'm thinking of Douglas Gordon's film 24 Hour Psycho. That was where he slowed the film Psycho down to 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's like frame by frame by frame.
Oh, God.
That was shown in Dublin. I saw it in London. 24 Hour Psycho. It's kind of ringing in my head somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of lunacy. So there is a repetition. So the way I'll set it up, Emer, is like this. Okay, so it's 24 hours. So each hour I'm kind of working on a cycle of actions that happen over an hour. But as the hours go on, that's going to unravel, you know.
Yes, yeah.
But there's a soundtrack I'm working on, and with Stefan Coonan here in Kilmainham, and we're working on this sound. So we're basing it like it's an hour-long soundtrack of it's percussion really. It's just beats, and changes, and it changes the dynamic and the energy, and so then it begins all over again. And as I say, that's how we're going to start out.
Yeah.
But when it comes to hour 14, I can't tell you how it's going to be.
Yeah. But that'll reveal itself.
But I think what has happened in the last week is that at some point I've made the decision that I can do it.
Brilliant.
And I've no question now in my mind. And
excellent.
I'm not going back to questioning.
Look, there's no doubt that it's going to be difficult at times, like especially towards the end. But imagine the enormous adrenaline rush or high or something that's going to come at the end of it.
That's what you were asking me about catharsis and about rebirth and Easter and resurrection.
I think it's like you'll be physically tired, but I imagine your brain will just be like...
I suppose when I see the images, for me it's very hard. I'm actually trying to make an image with my body. So when I see the images, that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah.
It's like, that's interesting. That's an interesting image. Yeah. So I totally encourage everybody to use their phones. And check
absolutely.
Out
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like for me, live art, going back to this idea of ego, the whole power of it is that everybody is involved.
Yeah.
The hardest hours for me will be from when I start at midnight to about 7, let's say. Somebody might appear before work. They go to work.
But you won't have a lot of...
the dynamic with live art is the exchange
between the audience and the...
Absolutely is. That's the most exciting thing for me, is taking the amount of energy that people give you, and it's this generous exchange of, I'm giving you an image, you're giving me your attention, and we're making this thing together.
Yeah.
Theatre is hugely like that, but it's just that in this case, I'm not theatre trained, I haven't a clue.
Yeah.
I have no idea, I have no skills at all, except just I'm just an artist, and I just want to make this image, And so all I'm doing is, when you're talking about training the body, I've been training for to be sustainable, that I can just sustain it.
You physically, compared to the last time I saw you to when you appeared for this, I was like, and now the hair as well. So you totally physically different, and you can see that you're getting ready for this.
Yes, like training, my brother said, it's like you're
someone getting ready for a marathon, because it is a bit of a marathon.
It is a marathon.
Yeah,
it really is. But first of all, I think the advice, if I'm thinking about somebody like Joan Jonas or Marina Abramovich, would have done long durational performances. The first thing you have to do is forget about time, because I have to actually drop out of time. Like a planet. I just want to become like the moon itself. Time is now gone. Once I start at 12 o'clock, I don't know after that.
You don't want
I'm not counting
clocks
the hours
anywhere near you. You don't want to know.
I'm just in it until Helena comes up and says it's over.
It's over. Imagine that moment.
So, but the whole dynamic of people coming in and out of the space would be so exciting for me. I wear glasses, so I won't be able to see, which is an advantage. So it's just, I'm a bit blurry.
But you feel that energy.
I feel it. I really feel it.
Yeah.
You really do. That was one thing to say. But the transformation thing, it's been... My brother says that it's like Ed Norton getting ready to play The Incredible Hulk. It's like how an actor trains their body. Or Orlando Bloom, or one of these.
I think it's a Daniel Day-Lewis type school of method where he turns into the person almost. That's the kind of sense I'm getting when just from watching you over the last few weeks.
For this piece, it requires it. Just so my back is strong, and my legs are strong, and then it's just it's sensible more than it's got nothing to do with vanity. It's sensible.
Well, physical readness and psychological readiness then as well.
Yeah. So when I go to the gym or whatever, I swim. By the way, I mean, I've always been a swimmer. So I'm used to routine in that way, and I swim every day here in Kilmainham, and I've just extended that, practice to just be physically ready. It's just about like you prepare any art material, like you prepare a canvas, and sanding it and minding it and gessoing it.
Same thing.
It's the similar. It's just material. And it's also just try to be responsible by doing the best I can to sustain this challenge that I've presented to Helena Tobin and to the Art Centre, and you guys have responded and said yes. So we're in it together.
For
me,
sure. Well, we'll all be down there on the day taking shifts to keep you company.
It'll be great.
So it'll be great. It will.
And then it'll be over.
And then it'll be over, I know. Well, look, there'll be a lovely record of it as well.
That's
and it'll be great. And I'm sure I look forward to the conversation with yourself and Fergus as well, because that'll be a different thing entirely, I think. Before I let you go, we need to come back to the Aran jumpers, because we haven't really talked about them, and the tower is the most dominant thing in the room, obviously.
Isn't it strange how, you come in, you walk past the tower, and we're all straight into the paintings, because they're like the new thing. It's a strange sculpture in that way, in that it's massive. It's massive, dominating. It's taken up the entire atrium, and yet, it's not, to me now, it's not imposing in its... It's got a different kind of presence. No, you want to touch it or rub it or hug it or put your hand in a pocket and it's catching a lot of eyes from outside the building, because I really particularly like when people just wander in off the street and have no idea what they're looking at. It's the best. And you get to maybe talk to them for a minute and and their day is altered by looking at an artwork. It is, yeah. So the first piece in the exhibition is two pieces. There's this piece I've made for the window, which is these yellow theatre lighting gels, and they're hanging straight down like 3 long sheets of colour. That was inspired by a small church that I saw last year in Perugia, where there was a yellow glass window in this small room, and it was the church was dedicated to St. Michael, St. Michele, who is the patron saint of military and also artists, and one of many. That's interesting, yeah. So those two things are where I'm at, of course, at the moment. So I wanted to change the Aran sweaters. So the Aran jumpers were collected in Clonmel charity shops and further to Carbotsell over about 2 years. Yeah. And then I had a hand sewing machine, and putting a couple of 100 jumpers through it, it's finally said no more. You've like big biceps after that now. So the origins of that were very much here in Clonmel, where when I moved down, I went to the museum, of course, one of the first places, and that's where I first saw the Hogan jersey. Yeah. Which is one of the most precious objects in the museum. And it's a sportsman's sweater that has holes in it that are darned. And it has great national, cultural and devotional significance in this, especially around here. But it also is just what it is, which is this small-ish sweater, that's just made of wool. It's a very vulnerable thing. And so that really inspired me to start thinking about jumpers. It's really... Do you want to stop, is it? Do you want to go downstairs and we'll do the Aran jumpers? Okay. So just finally, Austin, we've repositioned ourselves downstairs to the atrium, where we are standing in front of your tower of Aran jumpers, which you spent 2 years collecting these jumpers. And then you've stitched them all together using, you told me, a mechanical sewing machine, a non-electric one. Yes. A lot of the materials I use are found things. Discarded, rejected, or unwanted. Like those prints were all found, by the way, in the Carbotsell and in just junk shops. And I'm always looking for material in that way. And then you have this kind of material comes with its own history. Absolutely. And then you can fashion it into something else. You told me something very interesting about all the different cables, which I didn't know. That the different cables represented different families. Different families, Yes, the families traditionally would have their own pattern. So people could recognise each other just by their jumpers. Yes, this is the history, or the lore. That fishermen were recognisable by the pattern that they wore. But they also, to me, when they're changed like this, they remind me of kind of field patterns, or becomes another kind of a landscape. So I collected them. I should say, just thinking about the Hogan jersey, I started thinking about the Aran sweater as kind of the national jersey, and how at the time when I started this work, it was not popular. People were. That's why there were so many of them.
Yeah.
People were throwing them out. It was like we're finished with that now. That's not Irish anymore. It's just kitsch.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm not the first artist to be interested in kitsch objects and transforming them into something else. They have their own value. Now they're having a new moment because of a movie that's come out apparently, and Taylor Swift wore an Aran sweater to the Grammys or something.
Oh, that's it.
So now they're back.
They're back.
But I didn't know any of that, of course. For me, they have their cultural history. And also they were this discarded, difficult thing that have a love-hate relationship with, I would say.
Yeah.
Where when we love it when it suits us, because when somebody wins an Oscar in an Aran jumper, we're all wearing them. And otherwise, it's Irish-American kitsch nonsense that we hate, you know.
An early memory of mine is I was in the Girl Guides and I was about 7 or 8, I'd say, and the Patrick's Day parade came around and we had these little blue dresses with a little, you know, I didn't have the proper attire. There was a blue cardigan or whatever and a little hat that you wore with it, and I didn't have it. So my mother, in her infinite wisdom, decided she'd knit me a special Aran cardigan and a hat to go with it. So while we all walked down through the town, everybody else was in blue, and I just stood out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
and it was
your mother must have been delighted to see you standing out.
And then that was on I remember seeing this news the same evening, and there was like a high shot of Clonmel Parade, and there's me in the middle of it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, talking about mothers and jumpers, apart from seeing the Hogan jersey, around the same time, I'd say, my brother came home from Portugal with his Portuguese girlfriend, who we all fell in love with, and my mother bought her an Aran sweater. And I took a picture of her. She came to visit me, and I said, here she is in this Aran sweater, this beautiful Portuguese young woman. Now, we never wore them.
Yeah.
And at the time I was thinking, what possessed my mother to buy and put this girl into this Aran sweater, and so, as if this is something we all did.
Yeah.
And of course she looked so odd, and but quite seriously about mothers. I mean, the piece does evoke something for me about the sweater as a protective thing.
Yes.
You know, and most likely a lot of these sweaters were hand knit by mothers for their children or their husbands.
Definitely, yeah.
So it has that pre-loved, pre-made, intentional energy, for me. So
when I heard we were going to have a tower of Aran sweaters filling up the double height space, I had a completely different image in my head. Completely different. I think I had a round tower in my head, actually.
But I completely see why you would have gone to a round tower and Aran jumpers, because that's what's for sale. That's Shannon duty-free Irishness. Yeah. Whereas, I was thinking of a tower because of the tower houses in South Tipperary. So when I moved here, we don't have these tower houses really in Kerry, where I'm from. So when I moved here, I was really struck everywhere by seeing these square, fabulous Norman towers dominating in key positions along the river. And so these to me were like major sculptural interventions in the landscape. That's what I was responding to. Also seeing the sweaters when they're displayed like this look like stonework. So they look like, you can really examine in the Rock of Cashel, the stonework there, or any, well, Feathert, where I live, nearby is, so steeped in medieval stonework. Yeah. It's one of the best preserved stone towns, in Ireland. So these are the things that are informing the work, I suppose. The other thing was I started reading William Butler Yeats's collection, which is called The Tower. And that was written in 1923. And a lot of the poems in that collection people would know, Sailing to Byzantium. And, he was writing at a time of transition in his life. He's kind of about the same age as me. And so he's kind of looking back and forth. And he was living in this tower in Tour-Ballylee, which I only saw for the first time last summer. So, like we were talking about earlier, about all the things that influence, the work. These are all of the elements. Yeats, Aran sweaters, culture, Celtic daggers, Irish dancers. All of it gets distilled down to allow a new thing to come out, which is. And when I stood in this space, and I always look up. I haven't seen. There may have been another artist who's used the space in this way, but I've never seen anyone using this atrium space
It's rare.
in this way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, and I reckoned I had around about enough jumpers to fill a 17-foot tower that's 6 foot square. I said, I think I have about that amount. And actually, it turns out that's exactly what we
just
had.
right.
So I made it all into one huge panel, actually.
Yes, and
It's
then
one panel,
dressed.
like, so it's however long, it's so many meters long. And so it's one huge, enormous thing that rolls all up into a big lump. But it's, what's amazing is that the sweaters, of course the world is divided as to whether they're Aran jumpers or Aran sweaters. Everybody has strong opinions about that. But I go between the two. But they have survived really well, they look really fresh. And
they do look really fresh.
In spite of them being rolled and put up in the attic and taken down and all kinds of places they've been.
I suppose they had to be hardy, kind of weird, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's wool and acrylic, it's not just wool. It's not that pure. It's quite impure in parts. It's cotton. But the main thing is that they are somebody's.
They're somebody's. Each one is somebody's.
Somebody wore it or rejected it. Or
I love the idea now that a lot of them would have been hand knit and.
Oh, very much. You see here.
Love in them.
This one here with the berries. These are called berries, and they would have been all knit. That had to be hand knit. It's very little. This is machine, obviously.
Tons of work.
So, and then the gels on the window just change it from being from the bawnine. When I was thinking about using them, I've used them once before. I was thinking about making them for here. I thought, will I dye them a colour, or will I put charcoal on them, or how will I transform them in some way? And that's when I had this idea of just lighting them, not artificially, but using natural light.
Yeah, and it's a really...
so it's not just natural light, actually. There's no lights on the piece at all. And that really pleases me, that it's not theatrical in that way. It's a standalone, mysterious object that's just a piece of sculpture.
It's so dominant in the space. So to really notice it in the space, you've got to obviously have to walk around it. So it's changing the track of your normal, which happens with every show. There's always something in every show to make you change the way you interact with the space. But this one is particularly.
Someone was reminding me of the Hajj in Mecca. It's that square black box.
Oh yeah.
That's so mysterious. And everybody walks around that.
Okay.
Round and around and around. We don't know what's inside.
We could do a little meditation, actually. We could do something.
It could become a new site.
Yeah. Little performance in here now. Around the tower.
It's, I really wanted to make a large abstract kind of sculpture for here. That's what I wanted. But it comes then loaded with all its own history and culture. And then hopefully it leaves all that and just becomes a work of art.
It just becomes itself, yeah. Well, I think, Austin, I'm going to let you go now. It's been fascinating. I'm really looking forward to the performance on the 22nd. So I just want to say good luck with that. It'll be wonderful and brilliant, and we look forward to helping you through the 24 hours. And good luck with it all. And hopefully this is just the start of an even bigger blossoming into something bigger again.
Thanks, Emer. It was a privilege.
That's it for another episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. We very much look forward to Imperial Lunatic on the 22nd of April, details of which will be appearing on our website. And Austin will also be in conversation on the 25th of April at 2 p.m. in the STAC Chapel with Fergus O'Crahur. You can visit our website www.southtip.artcentre.ie to find out more about Some Signs Are Secret, Some Manifest, about Imperial Lunatic, and indeed about Austin's conversation with choreographer Fergus O'Crahur on the 25th. If you'd like to get in touch with the podcast, the email address is southtip.artspodcast@gmail.com, and we always love to hear from you. Till next time, take care.